My other kids are like, you two need to have a laugh off. You just laugh, you do a laugh, and then the other person does a laugh, and the other person has to do a different laugh. So you have to keep doing different laughs.
And how did it go?
We've done this 6.5 minutes of laughs.
Oh, geez.
No, I'm starting one.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like,
Oh, that was the best one. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of When Records Ruled, the podcast where we share our love of rock music and pop culture from the 70s and 80s and take a few B-side tracks down memory lane along the way. So unvelcro that Trapper Keeper and get ready to take some notes because it's time to hit the play button. I'm your host, David Norris, and joining me on this flashback musical road trip are my good friends Brian Strom and Lance Schwartz. Do you guys need an eraser-mate erasable pen for your notes at all?
Oh, yeah.
You remember either of those items?
Man, that was great. I just couldn't believe it. Just like, you can erase ink?
Yeah.
No way.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
You're like, it's almost like a magic trick,
Yeah.
right? For your friends. Yeah,
kind-
check this out.
Kind of amazing how you were into pens when you were a kid, too. You know?
Yeah.
The one we had, a lot of us had, chromatic. Remember
Yeah,
chromatics?
yeah.
Different colors.
Four different colors or whatever.
Yeah. That was like so cool. To get
Taking that
chromatic.
apart and you see all those
Yep.
ink things in there. That was,
If you had like the metallic pens, like there was almost like kind of a marker, but those were like super cool to write with, like on your notebook.
Yep.
Metallic
Oh, yeah.
colored. Yeah.
Yeah.
Silver, gold. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I do remember. Fun stuff.
Right? Did you have a Trapper Keeper? Anyone?
I did not. We had Peaches, so I didn't have that.
I had
It's kind of
cheap,
based on that, actually.
Yeah.
I read up on it, actually. Yeah.
I had cheapo 29-cent folders.
Yeah.
That's what my folks bought.
Cheapo brand?
That's right. Cheapo
Mead.
Records.
Yeah.
Was it Mead?
Mead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trapper, I just had a standard, I think, blue Trapper Keeper. They came out with all the fancy stuff with like cats on it and 80s graphics after that, but I just needed the simple one.
Mm-hmm.
But they were pretty fun to have.
Definitely remember Velcro. I might even had a pair of sweatpants with Velcro.
They were going to say shoes. I had the shoes too.
Yeah,
Velcro shoes. Wow.
They were fun. I mean, easy on, easy off.
Yeah, they were.
No mess around with tying laces and stuff.
You had things to do.
That's right. All right. So in this episode, we're once again moving away from talking about a particular album. And instead, we're going to be discussing our first impressions of music, the stuff our parents listened to and we grew up with. I think it's fair to say we each had different experiences growing up and how music played a part in that. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting kind of discussion because of that. So what do you say we get right into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. First question. When did you realize music was important to you? Start with Lance.
Well, I'm just guessing, but I think I'm within 1 or 2 years on the answer here. I think it was about 9, 10, somewhere in that area. I might have mentioned in a previous episode, the first 45 I ever owned, I got for Christmas. I want to say it was Christmas when I was probably 10. It was by a band called The Sweet, Fox on the Run. Kind of
Foxy Fox.
You know, it was it was a very kind of early glam rock,
Yeah.
you know, and set the stage for a lot of stuff that I probably listened to after that with power chords and guitar solos and harmony. It was really, I vividly remember putting that on Christmas Day because I think my folks got me the 45 for Christmas. So, that was 75.
Wait, did you have some headphones to listen to that, or was it just like on repeat? So you were like annoying your family with the song playing over and over and over.
You know, so it was a manual turntable. So I suppose I had to go back, you know, and put it on
back
again.
put it back on. Yep.
Yeah, I probably did annoy my folks. I'm sure I annoyed my folks many times over the years with my music.
Why did we do this? Why would we buy this for him? And
then I guess it was maybe a year or two after that, I wanted to have my own stereo. So I think we went to a place, well, I must have got it for a birthday or Christmas or something like that. My folks got me what I thought was a stereo, but it was a radio with 2 speakers that were hardwired. I mean, you couldn't even unplug them. It was Yep. And I think it was by a brand called Sound Design. If you look it up, it was a brand, but it was just this off brand that you could get probably like Kmart or something. Yeah. Or maybe in our case, it was Zayre's Shopper City. I don't know if they had those. That and LaBelle's was another one. There's like these catalog stores where you could get the catalog and dream, and then you'd order it and it'd be ready for you there. Kind of, boy, that's similar to what you do nowadays.
Except you get it in like 2 days versus 2 months.
Right. So I got that stereo, quote unquote stereo, and listened to a lot of radio, both AM and FM. And maybe we'll get into those radio stations a little later, but radio played a huge factor in my music development because we couldn't go out and buy a lot of albums and 45s, especially when you're 10 years old.
Yeah.
So listen to a ton of radio.
They're expensive when you don't have money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I was just thinking too, you brought up that you got that 45 as a gift.
Yeah.
Music really was a gift that was given a lot. I mean, it's like, I remember getting them for Christmas, or, you had a friend have a birthday party, and you buy them a record or something.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an easy gift,
You knew kind of something they liked,
Yeah.
And you're pretty sure they didn't have it.
Well, go get them a record.
Yeah.
I'm thinking gifts. My grandma, when she was like 70, got me a couple of records.
Yeah.
For my birthday. I must have been 14, 15, and she asked my folks, well, what does Lance want? Well, he likes music. And I remember to this day what albums they were, too. It was Foreigner, Head Games, and Styx Crystal Ball, which was earlier, but I really wanted that Styx album because I was into Styx. I already had Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight. And
so were you like dropping hints, or did you probably don't remember them asking you like what albums you would like, or do you?
Yeah, I think my mom asked, what would you like? And my grandma went out and got them.
Well,
like, that's so cool, Grandma.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So even Grandma
was cool.
Played a role.
Nice.
Can you picture her going into the store and
do
you have
can you point me to Foreigner?
This album
Yeah.
by Styx? They're not even spelling that
Stykes.
right.
Right.
What is this?
Yep. Oh, fun stuff.
Yeah. The first record I remember my dad bought me, and it was a song called Sneaky Snake by Tom T. Hall. And that came out in 1974. So I was 4 years old. Maybe I was 5. And it was a great song. It's a good kid's song. Dave and I actually covered that in our little boxcar duo band.
Sneaky Snake Goes Dancing.
He does. So that was my first memory of music, and that was my first thing that was my music.
How old?
I was about 4 or 5.
Oh, wow. You can remember back that far.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So listening to that all the time. My dad had a box of 45s. He also had some 78s. But songs I remember like Beep Beep by the Playmates.
Yep.
That's My Paw by Shep Willey. He'd pull out these, and me and my brother and sister, we'd just be cracking up listening to this stuff that he's playing. And so I guess that was my first, experience with music, and thinking, this stuff was so good you'd actually go out and buy it. You'd own it. It's not just listening on the radio. But yeah, and then lots of radio. Yeah, I listened to probably when I was about 9 years old, I probably really started listening to the radio.
Yep, same as me.
I remember my parents, my mom, Johnny Cash fan, so they had a lot of records. So, and it was a thing that you physically had to do. So yeah, it was, we knew about throwing records on and listening to those, and so lots of that kind of stuff.
Did they have one of those record players? I think we talked about this in a previous episode, maybe off recording, that they had like the big
you
tower on it.
Load a bunch on it,
yeah,
and they drop at the end, and the next one would drop. Yeah. Yep. They had.
I don't know how many you could drop on there, but
you could put 3 or 4 or 5.
Oh.
Yeah. I think the higher they got, then I don't know. It probably just started to get distorted or something, or
I remember
the needle was shooting
up
too high or something. Yeah.
You have to go like kind of nudge it to get the other one to drop sometimes because their stack was too big.
And the other thing was too, I remember like our stereo was in our living room. Well, if you're in the kitchen or another room, you got to kind of crank it up so you can hear it.
I mean, you're doing dishes, you got to listen to the music loud, right?
It's in the other room, so turn it up.
Yep. Point the speaker that way.
I can remember cranking it up and then dancing around, and all of a sudden, poof, you skip the thing because you're jumping on the floor so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before that kind of technology existed.
Yeah. Oh, well, speaking of records, I don't know if we talked about this or not, but I remember in school, you'd watch a movie or a slideshow basically, and we'd play a record, and that would be talking for what we're watching, and we'd make little spitballs or wads of paper, and we'd be throwing them at the record player, trying to get it to skip to mess up the thing. Yeah,
because it'd like say beep or whatever, and then you like go next slide or whatever. Yep. And how often did you get it to skip?
Occasionally, but you had to be sneaky because teachers obviously knew what was going on. But that was always fun.
I had kind of a somewhat similar experience, but I'm taking this question a little bit differently because I think I realized when I was young how music could impact me a little bit differently maybe than what you guys are remembering. So I think kind of like Brian, I was pretty young, and I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was pretty young, probably 6 or 7 maybe. And I remember being at my aunt's house, and we were playing downstairs with my cousins, and they had like a little bedroom off to the side, and we had like a little radio or something in there, just playing music off the radio. And I'm just kind of looking out the window, taking a break from whatever we were doing. And a song comes on from John Denver's Sunshine on My Shoulders. And it's really slow, and it's meant to be kind of a happy song, right? But man, I broke down. I don't know why. It just moved me so much. I was like almost crying.
You were very mature for your age.
I guess. I mean, it just like almost overwhelmed me for some odd reason. Just the sound of his voice and the music playing and just what I was experiencing visually out the window. Like they had really nice view of like trees and stuff going on. And it was just a wow moment. Like I remember that very distinctively going, wow, this is a powerful medium here.
Yeah.
So there's a lyric or a line in the lyrics, isn't it, that says some sunshine almost always makes me cry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that may
was like make you high.
Yeah,
or is it high? There's something in there about
there's
probably both.
It's both. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was like my first recollection anyway of, music is important, and it can, do things to you, like move me to tears, at a young age. But I started paying more attention to music, I think, via radio, like you guys were saying too, after that. Really, you had nothing better to do on a lot of family trips, right? You're listening to the radio. Right. Or at home, you're like, man, well, I'll just hang out and listen to the radio while we're reading a book, or just playing something on the floor, some trucks or something, and you're just listening to the radio.
Mm-hmm. And how often do you listen to the radio now?
I mean, if I'm traveling kind of back and forth between work and I don't have my phone plugged in, listening to Spotify, I will occasionally listen to it, but it's more and more rare. I don't listen to it at all at home.
Right.
I mean, I got to be in my car.
Yep.
If I'm going to.
I have a boom box in my garage, and I like tinkering in the garage and cleaning the garage, and it's kind of, the man cave place besides my stereo room. And I have on that boom box, it's dialed into the classic rock station, and I can listen for hours. In fact, our local classic rock station is pretty good.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that I haven't heard in quite a while.
They revamped their programming within the last
Yeah.
year or so.
That helps.
It did.
Yep.
But when you mentioned listening to radio, Dave, there are certain songs that I'll hear now, and I can remember as a kid hearing that song on the radio. And I printed out a list of songs from 74, which would be about when I first...
Oh, wow.
Stuff.
You took a deep dive. We didn't,
Yeah,
didn't go
no,
that deep.
it was just kind of
Go through some of
interesting.
them.
Well, the Hollies, The Air That I Breathe,
Oh yeah. That's all I need.
The Night Chicago Died by Paper Lace.
Yeah, totally.
Totally remember that. Band on the Run
Yep.
by Wings. These are all songs that just bring me right back to the basement in my house that was unfinished, where I had a little hockey area set up, and I'd crank up the music and play hockey and or floor hockey, that is.
Yeah.
And
You're truly from Minnesota.
yeah, true. True, yeah. So I bet there's songs too that you guys remember from about that time. They'd be a little different than mine, but it's kind of fun to look back. I see a John Denver song on here, Annie's song.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and that'll come up a little bit later
Yeah.
too here. So
Yeah.
So what are some of the bands or artists your parents listened to?
So my mom was, I mentioned earlier, Johnny Cash. That was probably her favorite band. And Elvis.
Oh, she was a big Elvis fan.
She was a big Elvis fan. Dean Martin. My dad was, I remember Buddy Holly. Somewhat Elvis. I think what else he listened to, but he was that early 50s music. I mean, that was their sweet spot. And when we're talking about our sweet spot, that was theirs. I remember as a kid working in the garage with my dad on Saturdays, and it was on the radio. It was Saturday with Sinatra, and
Nice.
it was Frank Sinatra for like 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
And so that was, I remember that.
was that a radio show or was
It was just on the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
on a easy listening station or
Yep.
something? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
And I don't think my dad was a huge Sinatra fan, but he liked him, and that was what was on the radio. So
You listen to a lot of Sinatra now
I do now. Yeah.
because of that, you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because of that. And that's probably been more in the last 10 years
Yeah.
that I started listening to Frank Sinatra. And then, and this goes back to my grandparents, Bing Crosby. They kind of influenced me on that. So
I like those
I
old
listened to,
crooners.
oh man.
Totally.
I remember my grandparents when I just got married and our first house, and my grandparents were coming over, and I had a Bing Crosby CD. So I threw that on while they were sitting in the living room, and my grandma just perked up. She's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Well, I can turn it down." "Oh, no, turn it up."
Yeah. Go grandma.
Yeah.
How about you, Lance?
So I'm sure my folks listened to stuff early on, but I only remember what they were listening to in the 70s. So we've mentioned John Denver a couple of times,
Yeah.
and his album Back Home Again, which I have in my collection, and had Grandma's Featherbed. We thought that was such a cool
Oh, yeah.
song as kids. Thank God I'm a Country Boy.
Yep.
In really memorable John Denver songs that he was probably at his creative peak at that point.
Yep.
It's interesting about John Denver, I think anyway, is he's very underrated vocalist. He's got a excellent tenor voice.
Yeah. It's very pure, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. Really. But he got into acting and he had a TV show, and I think his music kind of got overlooked because of all the other stuff that he was doing. But I remember that album a lot. And then Neil Diamond, tons of Neil Diamond. Yeah, I don't know if the Neil Diamond was more my mom or my dad, but I know they both liked Neil Diamond. And I can recall especially the Neil Diamond Greatest Hits. It's got a gray cover with a black and white photo.
Black and white. Wasn't there gold in that? Maybe not.
There was a Neil Diamond Gold too.
Maybe
that
that's what I was
had
thinking of.
that was a little before this one.
Okay.
But they had quite a few Neil Diamond albums in their collection, and I'll still listen to Neil Diamond today. And this is a funny one. Remember Captain and Tennille?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
heard them on the radio the other day.
Really?
I guess not on the radio. I was listening to an old Casey Kasem episode.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that came up. Yeah.
It was on the radio replay.
It was a replay, yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
No commercials. I loved it.
Oh, yes.
I think the album they had was called Song of Joy, and Lonely Night was big one. And then Muskrat Love. It was just
Love, yeah.
totally corny music.
Isn't
I mean,
Muskrat Love, that is just the weirdest song.
it really is.
Because it's like, they're singing it like a ballad and you're singing about muskrats.
Yeah.
And it's just so weird. And then for it to be such a big song.
Yep.
Wow.
And I think the biggest one on there was Shop Around.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
better jump around.
Yeah. I don't think it holds up real well.
Yeah.
Very of the time, right?
Very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah, totally 70s.
Like a lot of those songs.
Yep. And then finally, they were really into organ music.
Oh.
Like
Oh,
Bach
Okay.
and hymns. We
Yeah.
had tons of records with mostly like Lutheran hymns
Yeah.
and stuff. And that I still, and Dave knows that he's coming to my office and I'm cranking
Yeah.
organ music.
I was like, what are you listening to?
Yeah.
Oh,
Organs were big in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean,
Virgil
remember
Fox,
at
have you
the
ever heard?
mall. I mean, you go to the mall
Oh.
and there was an organ store.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had one in our mall too. Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Pianos, but it's like probably about half, if not more, organs.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there, I remember there'd be a guy, they'd have an organ sitting out. They'd push it out into the mall area a little bit and you'd be out there playing and jamming on that
Yeah.
thing. It's like,
We had
what?
actually had a neighbor or a family friend who had one in their house.
Yeah.
And
My
I always thought,
grandparents
this is
had
the
one.
coolest- yeah, with all the little push
Yeah.
snap
All the
stops and stuff.
As a kid, that was so fun.
I
There's
just
like all
always
these
wanted to play
sounds.
on that. Yeah.
Yep.
What cool sound can I make if I do this? And
Yep.
this
Yep.
combination is like endless combinations.
Wow.
Yep. Was it Kimball? I think, or Kimball organs, the home organs. And there was, speaking of malls, there was a mall, smaller mall, and there's a pizza place that had an organ, pipe organ.
What?
It was awesome. You would, it'd take a while, 40 minutes to get your pizza or whatever.
Yeah.
And the organ player, the artist, he would take requests,
Yep.
try to stump him. I bet he won't know. I remember being there and we said, La Cucaracha. And he knew it, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, organs were
We had the
super
same
huge.
thing out in California, and there was called the Pizza Joint, and they had the guy in there playing that same thing.
Yeah.
But it had all the other weird instruments that he could trigger from there.
Yep.
You'd have drums and stuff going,
Yep.
and all sorts of train
Kind of
whistles.
the one-man
and-
band. I've
yeah,
seen
the
a video
one-man
of a guy
band.
playing that recently, and they're
Oh.
like super fun.
So awesome.
Yeah.
I remember we ate there occasionally, but a lot of times even just going to pick up the pizza, and I'd always want to go with because you get to go in there and he'd be in there jamming away. And
You're like, I hope the pizza takes a long time
Yeah.
to bake.
yeah,
Yep. There was on one end of the mall, and I think it was just a long hallway and a small mall, maybe 20 stores, something
Yeah.
like that. So I'm sure they put them on that one end because the thing was so loud.
Yeah,
the other
right.
stores would be, no, not again.
Shut that guy up.
So we didn't have a ton of music in the house other than my mom would play a lot of like compilation albums. She was more of a big country fan. So
Or Western.
yeah, right, country and western. But like Johnny Cash, that would be a big one. Mostly country compilations, a few modern type artists, but mostly like Tennessee Ernie Ford, Waylon Jennings.
Yep. Oh yeah, Waylon Jennings. Yeah.
He's got a lot of stuff. Yeah, Lukenbach, Texas, Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, Dukes of Hazzard theme,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Horton. I think I
we
sprang that
mentioned
name
that,
on
yeah.
you a while back, Lance.
Johnny, yes,
Battle
you
of
did.
New Orleans and North
Yep.
Alaska. Marty Robbins.
Yeah.
Speaking of Western,
Yeah.
El Paso. Kenny Rogers, Anne Murray.
Oh,
Lots of-
Anne Murray. Yeah. My
Yep.
mom was a Anne Murray fan.
Yeah, she had. We had a lot of Anne Murray. We had, I think, an Anne Murray Christmas album.
She's a
maybe even.
Canadian, I believe.
Is she really?
And Murray,
believe
yeah.
so.
I
Yep.
did not know that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. In the K-Tel albums, I don't know if you remember.
K-Tel,
Yeah. So we
big
had
time.
quite a few of those. We even had like a Looney Tunes, like just crazy songs. One
Yeah.
my brother and I used
Looney
to listen
Tunes
to.
album? Or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't actually like Daffy Duck singing. It was like just crazy songs.
Yeah.
I have a compilation of all those in like a Spotify playlist now
Oh,
too.
fun.
And so that was kind of more my mom. My dad didn't listen to a ton of stuff, but what he did listen to was kind of like 50s some crooners, but a lot of like doo-wop stuff, like Bill Haley and his Comets, that kind of stuff. And once again, it was kind of compilation stuff that he'd pick up and we'd listen to like when we were on our way out camping or something, traveling usually mostly. Buddy Holly was the big one. Bing Crosby, Beach Boys, Everly Brothers, stuff like that. Do you guys, did you ask your parents at all, or do you know if they went to any concerts when they were younger? So I asked my mom this, you mentioned the Tom T. Hall.
Yeah.
And I would ask my dad and he's like, no, never been to a concert. No. But my mom says, I think we were talking about Kenny Rogers when I was talking to her and asking her about that. She said she wanted to go to Kenny Rogers, like I think it was the early 80s when he was kind of peaking.
Yeah.
At really big albums. And he had like 4 shows in our town. And she said, we couldn't though, because everybody wanted to go. And the tickets were really expensive.
Yeah.
Like you should have just gone by yourself with your friends or something. But she did go to Tom T. Hall when he played like a West High School in town. And I don't know how many that sat, but it wasn't very many.
Yeah.
But she remembered it was around like 73 or 74.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I was way too young for that one. How about your parents?
I know Johnny Cash. I know that.
Your mom?
My mom and dad.
Oh, they both saw. Okay.
Yeah. And that was early 70s. Man, I can't think of any other ones. I know there was a couple other ones.
I go see Elvis?
No. Chris Christopherson maybe, but maybe not.
Oh, that would have been good.
I can't. I could be just faking that one. But that's the only one
they'll correct you later. Oh, by the way, when I was talking with my mom, she said, I listened to the podcast. And all right, well, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised.
What's a podcast?
Yeah.
Boy, I only know of one concert from experience. Remember them going to. It's a great question, and I'm going to ask my folks that now. But I remember them going to Neil Diamond. I think he had maybe 4 sold-out arena shows in the Twin Cities, and I know they went to one of them. That's the only show I ever recall. Maybe an organ concert here or there, but that was at a church. That doesn't really count.
I think I remember my parents when they went to the Johnny Cash show, because I think they came back with those like glow-in-the-dark necklace things.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so this was like the 80s maybe?
No, this was in the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah. And that just flashed
they still had that glow liquid technology back then, I know.
Because as a kid, it's like, whoa, that's awesome.
I
think they had to stick it in the refrigerator, and then like they showed them to us the next morning.
That
actually worked. Yeah. Yep.
I remember doing that.
Yeah.
Did Neil Diamond have a movie called The Jazz Singer as well?
Yeah. Yep. He also had
the Jazz Singer. I think that's what I was thinking was the black cover with the gold.
Yes,
where it's like a silhouette of him in gold.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. It's just a silhouette. That's because I remember seeing like commercials for that. I thought, and like, am I remembering that incorrectly? Like it was a promo for the album, or was it an actual movie?
Yeah, it was a movie.
Did you ever see it?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
He also wrote the soundtrack for something called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which I believe was a book first.
Yeah.
And there was a movie. It was really a weird 70s.
70s were a weird time.
They were. But now I'm going to go back and search some online sources, online movies, see if we can find the Jazz Singer.
Yeah.
What was Coming to America? Was that
Eddie Murphy?
No.
That's all I can think of.
You should know, we saw Neil Diamond. Dave and I went to Neil Diamond.
Yeah, I didn't know much of his stuff other than the big hits. But.
Yeah. I will not attempt to sing it, but he does have a song called America or Coming to America.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about now.
I wasn't putting that together. That's not the first thing I think of when you say Coming to America.
Yeah.
Seems to me that was in a movie too. So maybe he's been in more than a couple. But the Eddie Murphy one was a good movie.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd too.
Arsenio Hall.
Arsenio Hall.
No, you're thinking of trading
places.
Yeah. Okay. Cut that out.
Well, I'm not. That's going in. So I think we've kind of covered this a little bit, but do you listen to any of those bands or artists that your parents listen to still today?
I do. and I'm inspired by it. It makes me want to dig up all sorts of stuff. Probably listen to more of the music that they listen to than they listen to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because I think with my dad, you know, he can listen to the hit songs for eternity. And to me, I get burned out on that.
Yeah.
And so I'm digging deeper. I'm digging into albums that were not popular at all. And I'm just loving it. So
Just to see what else they had.
just see what else they have and find stuff I like. And so, yeah, I'm always digging around in that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like the Dean Martin thing, I didn't know my mom was this big Dean Martin song or fan, but just the other day we were just talking and she brought that, oh, I love Dean Martin. I was like, oh, really? So I went and looked up some Dean Martin, started listening to some Dean Martin.
Did you listen to like all the Rat Pack guys?
Oh, yeah. But he was her favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty good.
As far as music that my parents listened to that I'm still listening to, we kind of touched on this, but definitely John Denver. In fact, I'm like Brian. I went back into John Denver. I can't remember what live album it was, but I think it was like a 2 or 3 disc live album. And that's when I realized, man, John Denver has an excellent voice. Didn't know it. You didn't think about nuances in music when you're a kid. You just liked the tune.
Yeah.
But as you grow older, you learn to appreciate different aspects, you know, either the playing or the singing, and John Denver has definitely stuck with me.
John Denver, I don't remember, it was like maybe back in the 90s, early 90s, but there was always these PBS specials on John Denver.
Yeah, and I think that album was from the PBS
Was it
special.
like the Wildlife?
Yes, yeah.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember watching those and just being like totally inspired to listen to John Denver.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, this guy is amazing.
Yep, exactly. Great songwriter, great voice.
There was like a documentary that it's about him, but he's like narrating the documentary on himself and going through his life and all this stuff and all his songs. And it was really cool.
I'll have to check it out.
That was a PBS special, I remember.
Did you guys know that his wife, Annie's song was from St. Peter?
Yeah.
Just 10 miles down the road from
where we are. Wow.
Yep. I would say too, Neil Diamond, listen to still. Not as much as John Denver, but Neil Diamond, great songwriter, and have seen him in concert, and probably would continue maybe to go see him, but I think Neil Diamond has Parkinson's now and does not perform anymore.
Okay.
And then, I really do enjoy organ music, usually Baroque, like Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way I would have gotten into that had not my folks been listening to organ music when I was a kid. So
it's fun. It's fun to flash back and you listen. It's just, it's good stuff.
It is amazing how that brings you right back to your childhood days, right? Yep. In certain songs and certain.
Oh yeah. There are certain moments where I know I was listening to music and I can vividly remember what was going on at that time.
What you're doing, what room you're in. And this Johnny Cash. I remember going on a camping trip. My brother and sister were out of the house. And so it was just my parents and myself, and we went to Mount Shasta in Northern California. Mm-hmm. And along the way, we stopped at a gas station, and my mom bought a Johnny Cash Greatest Hits cassette on the counter there, Yep.
They had a little carousel.
Yep, little carousel. So that went into the tape deck, and that did not come out that entire trip. Oh, man. It drove me nuts. It get to the end and I'm like, oh, please, just
radio.
Pop it out. Nope. Auto reverse kept going. And
I think that was by design because I don't know how old you were at the time.
I was probably 16.
Yeah. Okay. They were sick of hearing your same songs coming out of your bedroom.
But this is my dad. Yeah, that's true. But in the truck, they had control. They could do whatever they wanted.
Well, for sure.
But and that drove me nuts. But then, when I'm in college and maybe a year or so after, I'm at the store and I see a Johnny Cash Greatest Hits CD. I snatched that up and I was hooked.
Mm-hmm.
We did the same thing when we road tripped out to Washington. I remember stopping at a gas station. We picked up a Buddy Holly greatest hits,
Holly.
and then that stayed in the play deck.
Oh man,
with our girlfriends at the time.
You and I got hooked on Buddy Holly.
Totally.
Did you have the Buddy Holly greatest hits with the kind of graffiti?
Yeah,
on the cover. Yeah, it's
I have that record.
Great album. Yeah, I do too.
Well, I think we might have even picked up another Buddy Holly along the way,
right?
Because we were just like, well, we can't just listen to this one. We got to have more Buddy Holly.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And then I bought like a box set that's like 5 records and has all these outtakes and him, before he was signed to the record label, his own recordings and stuff on it. And yeah.
I just had a flashback. A few years later, after that road trip, we were out in Washington for your wedding, and at your wife's house, my wife and I were staying at our house, and the Buddy Holly story came on TV.
Yes.
I can't remember who's the actor who plays it now.
Oh yeah, it was a great movie.
Yeah, he was in Lethal Weapon. I'm blanking on his name.
Yep.
Somebody out there remind me.
Teeth.
Yes.
Anyway.
Gary
Busey.
Yes.
Busey.
Yeah.
He did a great job in that movie.
Yeah. That was a fun one.
Yep.
It's funny you mentioned the camping trip. It total flashback after you saying that. I was on a camping trip with something called the Boy Pioneers. It was like the
Cub Scouts.
Yeah. Only the version we had up here. And I remember setting up the tent and somebody brought their transistor. Might have to get into that when we
transistor radio.
Yeah, that really shaped my music.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
having 2 transistor radios under the pillow at night.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember hearing Marshall Tucker Band "Heard It in a Love Song" while we were setting, and again, vivid. It's like I could go right back.
Flashback.
Right? Yep.
Yes.
It's fun.
So some of the artists I still listen to. I have kind of that compilation of what I can remember listening growing up in the classic country genre. And my wife's, she comments on this every once in a while. You're listening to country? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's not modern country. It's
classic country.
It's classic country. Yeah. All that stuff that I hear growing up, basically. I'm not listening to anything from nowadays, but I still listen to a lot of like 50s rock. I love 50s like surf music and all that stuff.
Jan
the
and
Buddy
Dean.
Holly. Yep. The Bing Crosby. We had a Bing, Bing's Christmas album, which is a classic.
Yep.
So all that stuff. I have kind of a classic Christmas album for that kind of stuff too. Everly Brothers, Beach Boys, that kind of stuff. So I'll get on a kick every once in a while and go listen to those guys, and you just go down so many rabbit holes with that, right? Like Marty Robbins. Oh, I know a couple of his. What else has he
Marty
got on this?
Robbins, yes.
So that's such a good stuff.
Do you go around at Christmas time, or do you remember the first time at Christmas when you went up to your kids and said "Meli Kaliki Maka"?
No,
I don't remember.
We listened to a lot of that.
Listened to the record a lot, or the album a lot.
Yes.
I remember doing that to my kids, and they're like, "What?
What?
It's Merry Christmas in Hawaiian."
So who influenced you in the music you listen to? Like friends or siblings, or maybe a transistor radio? Like,
yeah, the radio a lot. I remember my cousin Eric. He seemed to have a lot of current. He had 2 older sisters, Chrissy and Kathy, and they seemed to have a lot of the current music. So we were able to go over there, and I remember just laying down in his family room, and he had a record player there, and we would just be throwing
whatever
his
on.
45s on.
Was he a lot older?
I remember.
Or no?
What's that?
Was he a lot older or no?
My cousin?
Yeah.
My cousin was a year younger than me.
Oh, okay.
But his sisters were older.
Okay.
By 4 or 5 years or so.
So they have money to buy all these albums, right?
Right. So yeah, I remember like the B-52s and Convoy.
Oh yeah.
C.W. McCall.
C.W. McCall. What else? They were like the Cars, Shake It Up. Men at Work. I mean, I remember just listening to all these going over there. So he was an influence on that. My brother was a big influence. We shared a room. He's 4 or 5 years older than me. So I was forced to listen to a lot of things, but I liked it. So that was a big one. And then friends. I mean, I think music kind of brings people together, and a likeness of music even brings you closer. So my friend Todd and I, we were, he was a big Kiss, Iron Maiden fan. I wasn't a big fan, but I listened to him because he was listening to him. And I enjoyed that music now better now than I did back then, but probably just because of those memories and things like that. Mm-hmm. I had a friend, Jimmy, he was a big Police fan. So listen to whenever I hear the Police, I think of him.
And you probably know a lot more Police because of him now, right?
Yeah.
Same with Iron Maiden and Kiss.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
So yeah, definitely Friends and radio and MTV.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Radio, big time.
I had a cousin as well that influenced my musical upbringing. Cousin Steve, he is probably 4 years older than me, 4 or 5. Sorry, Steve, if you're listening. It's less than that. But he had, I think maybe mentioned this when we reviewed Van Halen, but he had Van Halen. First time I ever heard that was in his room when we were over at the cousin's house for some family gathering. And stuff like Deep Purple, Kansas. It was really fun I must have been 12 or something like that, discovering this stuff. And then I remember moving over to FM radio when album-oriented rock first started being broadcast about that time too, where they played deep tracks and that sort of thing. So that's where I learned a lot about prog rock and things that weren't popular on the radio. Wasn't my earliest experiences, but that's when I really found that stuff shaping what I would like going forward.
Yeah, that was before my time. I mean, even, 4 years or whatever the difference is. Because I remember listening to top 40 stuff, and then FM wasn't like, wow, this is so different than I'm used to. It was just kind of there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you seem to have experienced that change to that.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because some of those stations really haven't changed their format much. They still play Yes and, like I said, Kansas Sticks, that sort of thing. But, that was just at times at my cousin's, but AM radio prior to that really shaped. It was what I listened to early on. There was a station out of Chicago. Do you remember when you could pull in radio stations? And you still can at night because they had the stronger signals. Mm-hmm. The smaller stations would power down. And I don't exactly know why it was a government regulation, but there's a station called WLS in Chicago that played a lot of top 40. And I remember sticking that transistor underneath my pillow and probably falling asleep with it on and hearing all these songs that were being played all over the nation. And then you'd listen to top 40, Casey Kasem, was it Sunday nights maybe? I guess it
could have been anywhere in different places.
Yeah. Syndicated, I suppose. Whenever
I listen to it all the time now. It's on iHeartRadio.
Yeah.
Casey Kasem's classic
countdown
from the 70s and 80s.
The long distance,
right? All the time.
Long distance dedication.
Oh yeah. I always had a couple of those, and
yeah,
it's fun. And I'm always surprised at songs. I'm like, this was a top 40 song,
just right?
What? This is a horrible song.
Probably a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, or even bands that are big. It's like maybe just because they were so big that it just happened to be on there and people just bought it up. I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's always shocking to me. It's like, wow.
Was it based on purchases or radio airplay or both?
Yeah. Both, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So whoever did a better marketing job sometimes probably got a little higher up in the listing.
Payola?
Yeah. They were paid to play to play on a bunch of radio stations, and it was selling okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There it was probably.
Another one of my influences, my Uncle Andy was in bands in the 70s, early 80s. And he was an influence. He'd be practicing in my grandma's house in his bedroom. I remember going in there and he would play me all sorts of stuff. And that was pretty fun. He played bass very loud.
Did Mama play fiddle?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure that was kind of cool though. Cause I mean, that's one of those instruments that probably you could feel him play.
Oh
right?
yeah.
You're like, check this out.
He taught me to play, Jag Al's band Centerfold.
Really?
That bass line. boom, boom. I could still play it now. Boom, 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 boom.
We got to get you a
It's
bass.
a real tough line, but
real complicated one.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I could play that one.
I don't play guitar, but I toyed around with guitars because I knew people that had them. And there were two things I could sort of make my way through.
Can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Smoke on the water.
Amen.
That's like one of the first things anybody learns.
Yep. That and 25 or 6 to 4.
Oh,
Dun,
would
dun,
not have
dun,
guessed that one.
dun, 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 dun,
Yes.
dun, dun, dun. It's just down
Yeah,
the scale.
right,
It's
yep.
super easy.
Yeah.
That's a good segue into my influences because I'll come back to the Chicago thing. Don't let me forget about that one. But so I would say the same thing. Parents, friends, probably more like friends in school because we'd be talking about music sometimes. And then, hey, what do you have? And
T-shirts.
what are you listening to? Yeah, you all see somebody with a concert
Yep.
T-shirt. And like we talked about in a concert episode, not a lot of people were coming to our town until I was maybe 13, 14. So it really wasn't much of a thing before then. But then when you saw people starting to wear other concert T-shirts, like, oh, Alice Cooper just came through because like the whole school, well, not the whole school, but I mean a lot of
a
people in
good
the
chunk.
school. So I better go check out some Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
It seems pretty cool because these cool people are wearing the T-shirts, right? A lot of time listening to the radio, like you guys. I mean, that's such a big influence, and I think it introduced you to music. You didn't always like what was being played, but when you did connect with something, you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I will go buy the 45, and that's why I have probably a bigger 45 collection than LPs because I would just buy the single. Then you introduce to whatever B-side they had, and you're like, oh, that was pretty cool too. And now maybe some obscure song from them that's not on the album even sometimes.
Yeah. I heard a story once of Kurt Cobain apparently went and saw Sammy Hagar during the 80s. And, the next day at school, he was wearing his Sammy Hagar shirt, which he would deny till the day he died. But, but his friends vouched that, yeah, he was wearing a Sammy Hagar shirt.
Cool.
Just wanted to be too cool. I actually remember sometimes asking my friends. We were over at a house one time playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, and I was
Nerd.
I know, right? And I had a mixtape recorded a bunch of songs from the radio, and I didn't know who played this one particular song. And it ended up being Deep Purple's Perfect Strangers, and I had no idea. But I was like, oh, it's such a cool song. And one of my friends finally figured it out for me. So, I mean, it was helpful to have friends that listen to music that way too.
Yep.
The Chicago one, though, in 6th grade, I had a really cool teacher. And he would go around and we had kind of a daily writing journal assignment, right? We'd just be writing about our day. He just wanted us to write, and he encouraged writing so much. He had like one of those little ink stamps on the back of a pencil. And if he saw us writing throughout the day, he'd come and stamp, right? Those equated to dollars at an auction for items he would buy. So basically, the more you wrote, you get like a whole page, and you would turn that in, and however many stamps it was, like say it's like 5 stamps, you get $5. And he would keep track of all this like a checking account for you, right? So at the end of the month, I think, he would have an auction, and he would just buy a lot of trinkety stuff, and he would auction off these things, and we had a certain amount we could spend. So it was kind of teaching you a little bit of economics too, right? But one of the items, Chicago's Greatest Hits. And I wanted this album.
Yeah.
I wanted it because it looked cool and it was music.
Yeah.
And it was the only thing he had up there that I thought had some high value. And I probably spent the majority of my checking account to get this album.
Yeah.
Had I ever heard a Chicago album? No. But it looked cool.
They have an
And I wanted that one.
iconic logo, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it the one of them like stringed down and painting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. They're on the
They're like
scaffolding
paint-
that's falling off, and they're
ropes
kind of
and
hanging
stuff.
up. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like half painted logo,
Yes,
right? And it
yes.
just looks so cool. I'm like, I mean, it was Rick DeMoss, and he had been in Vietnam and had some like really cool kind of stories about that too. But he was just one of these cool teachers who related well to kids. And I thought, man, if he's picking this album, it's got to be cool, right?
Yeah.
So I got it home and I'm listening to it, and it's like, well, I mean, it's not the stuff I'd been listening to probably, but I mean, you're exposed to new music, and I
Right.
got to learn, like a lot of the popular songs. I just kind of picked up on like, oh, I think I've heard this one, 25 or 6 to 4. Grow to like a lot of the songs on that album.
Yeah.
Just because of that.
You know what? Chicago is a band that I would say when I was, I don't know, 14, no way, I'm not listening to some band that has horns.
Horns in it.
That is
Right,
not
yeah.
a rock band.
Yeah, right.
And man, they're at near the top of my list now as really great musicians, and went to see them not too long ago too, even though majority of the band is no longer with them, but they sure still sounded great. And
isn't it fun to go back to stuff like that?
Yeah.
Where at some age you're like, no way, I'm not listening. This is terrible. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, you're like, that's pretty good stuff.
Yep.
You're just segueing into the next question, which is have your listening preferences changed over the years?
I got one more story I just thought of.
Back up.
When I had a paper out, when I first started that, I was like 10, 11 years old. And at the end of every month, you had to collect money, and then you paid your bill. You paid it to the newspaper.
Yep.
And if you paid your bill on time, there was a sheet where you could pick different little bonus things. It could be like a movie ticket or ticket to fast food place or whatever. But they'd also have 45s on there that you could pick from.
Wow.
So I got a number of 45s that way by paying my bill on time. So that was some music that maybe I wasn't real familiar with, but I'll try this one. It sounds interesting. And so,
you remember any of them?
I remember Hall & Oates.
Yeah.
I Can't Go For That. I remember that being one of them.
So are a lot of these ones that you picked, were they familiar at the time, or were you just like, well, that band sounds cool, I'm just going to pick them?
I think it's a little of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there wasn't like, you could pick from 10 singles. They might have 2 singles. And I don't know, where they were getting them or whatever.
Yeah.
But
EMG Music Service?
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so I remember that was kind of fun.
So back to the question now.
Okay. What was the question?
Have your listening
Dave?
preferences changed over the years? Lance kind of already alluded to that, where, you're going back to Chicago.
Right. I mean, for sure. It'd almost be disappointing if they didn't.
Yeah.
Because I know some people that are stuck in genres and periods of time, and it's like, boy, there's so much more out there. So yeah, I don't even know how to explain that except for the fact that your ears hear things differently as you get older. You appreciate quality musicianship, probably because you've listened so many times and you start to hear those nuances in the music and think, they're doing a great job with that. Or, it used to be really loud, the louder and the more guitars and all that. And that was my 1980s. If it wasn't AC/DC, Van Halen, it probably wasn't worth listening to. I can't pinpoint, though, exactly when that changed. It might have been, and I know Dave's especially into grunge. I never really got into grunge, and at that time, I started listening. Country got really big in the early 90s, and that was, thanks to Garth Brooks, Randy Travis, that sort of performer. And I started then to probably appreciate a little more, should we say, quieter music, and then it just really has unraveled since then to where there's not much music that I don't like except for disco. Disco sucks.
Still
It
sucks.
still sucks.
I would concur. There's still some good stuff though.
I wouldn't say I'm a huge grunge fan now. I mean, that was kind of my heyday of like really getting into a lot of new bands and like learning everything I could about them. Like I could name all the the musicians in the band and all that stuff.
And you don't have to apologize for it. I mean,
no.
I go back. No, that's another
Don't
one.
be so defensive.
I go back to, and I'm like, Soundgarden,
Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
Screaming Trees.
Very Pixies.
Yeah.
Great music.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was just not for me.
I gave it like a year.
Which year?
Like 91.
Yeah.
And then getting into
When it all
92.
started.
I know.
Pearl Jam.
And I thought, because it wasn't like, in a way, it wasn't like, oh, we're going from this music to this music. It was kind of like, oh, this is kind of a new thing happening. And you liked it. And then I just went like, I just couldn't get into it much after that. There was still good stuff and I listened to it, but I wasn't buying it. I wasn't physically purchasing it.
Yeah. And I was eating it up.
Yeah, you were. I remember that.
Yeah. All the stuff.
When we were doing our little band thing, Dave's like, oh, we got to do this song, by PJ Harvey. I'm like, what?
Who?
Are you kidding me? You want to do this? Like, okay. So yeah, you were
I rarely convinced you.
Yeah.
We were
true.
like, well, how about this Tom Petty song?
There we go. Now we're
That's good.
talking.
Yeah. Buddy Holly, you know? Hollow Notes? No, you didn't need Hollow. No.
Hollow Notes are great. I love them.
It's an easy yes for me too, because I think, you know, as music progresses and changes, I think your preferences changes. You still like the old stuff, and you know, we listen to it, kind of go on deep dives every once in a while. But I mean, I still appreciate even listening to new music now. You know, there's been a number of bands that I've heard live, like Joy Formidable. They had an opening band called A Place to Bury Strangers. Had I heard of them before? No. But man, I've picked up on a few of their songs after that. I haven't bought any albums or anything, but I still
You don't need to buy anymore.
I know, right? Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly it.
Current music, I have a hard time getting into. I can listen to it and say, "Wow, that's a really good song," and then I'll never listen to it again.
Really?
It doesn't suck me in. I don't. It's kind of weird. I think, you know, when I first started listening to music, it was top 40 stuff. And then I don't know, I was probably around 82 or 83. I was kind of narrowing in on the rock heavy metal stuff, as that was kind of getting big.
Yeah.
And then for, you know, 10 years there, I mean, that was all I listened to. And so I missed out on a lot of stuff that I go back to now and I'm like, wow. I mean, I was kind of a closet fan of some other stuff that you didn't want your friends to know you were listening to, because, you know,
like
we got to listen. The Hooters. The
Hooters are great.
I know.
Yeah.
But in 1986, I wasn't going to admit that.
Yeah, they were a little past their prime.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
Well, no, that was
they were
a
a
little
little
they were
easy listening,
popular,
though. Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, I'm listening like you. I'm listening to Rat and Van Halen and Scorpions and stuff, and that's you're not listening to it with your friends. You're listening to it in your bedroom at night by yourself.
Closet Hooters fan.
And I remember my brother-in-law Sean, when he was dating my sister. He's they liked Prince was big with Purple Rain at the time, and he was I don't know, I remember if he bought the album or whatever, and I was so disappointed in him. I was like, "You're listening to Prince? Are you crazy? What is going on here?"
Was he like a hard rocker guy?
Oh yeah, he was definitely.
That's right. You
he
guys
was
said
the
you would
Van Halen,
Dokken
and Rat. I mean, yeah, it was all that stuff we were listening to. So yeah, that was.
Hey, I
Total credit.
bought the 1999 album as well.
Yeah.
I have all of them, and total credit to Prince. And I say this because I can't think of, except for maybe Michael Jackson, an artist that blended genres so much that he got everybody that was into their different styles into his music.
Yeah.
It was rock. It was funk. It was disco.
Mm-hmm.
It was just this, and I believe it was intentional on his part. Like, you know what? I want my music to be accessible to everybody, and he did it.
And he moved on quick from whatever he was doing. I'm not doing that again.
True.
And it was like, I think Purple Rain was huge, and he's already recording. What's the next album?
Yeah, Around the World in a Day.
And that is so completely different.
Yep.
I mean, he could have easily done something just like Purple Rain, and
He
it
was
would
like-
have been huge.
Yep.
But no, he's like, no, we're moving on. From
So he's
this.
just kind of reinventing himself
Totally.
constantly.
A lot like the Beatles in that
Yeah.
way. The later Beatles.
Yeah.
You know how, you mentioned new music and having new music suck you in. And I will say, I do think there are some artists that have sucked me in over the last decade or so. And it's kind of fun because I go back to like when I was a kid and put stuff on repeat, and I learn all the words. And there's a handful of artists that have done that to me. And it's fun when it happens. So let it happen to you, Brian.
Well, I find myself rediscovering stuff from maybe the 90s and earlier. And
that's
so
fun too. Yeah.
I just dive back into, like, I'll hear something like, wow, that was really cool. And now everything is so accessible, whatever, music streaming service you have, you can listen to everything, stuff that you would have never bought. maybe never even heard of. You're like, wow, I didn't know they made this album in this year or whatever. And so that's kind of where I really find stuff and go digging back into that stuff.
So it's new old stuff.
New old stuff. Yeah, it's new to me.
So all those songs that I kept sending you, like, hey, you should check this new song out. And you're like, yeah.
No, I listen to them. And like I said, I'll like them. That's really cool.
Yeah, but then that's the one time you're like, that was cool.
Yeah, but I don't feel the need to go back to it.
Yeah.
So keep sending them to me. That's good. I'll listen to it. But
that totally happened with me just this last week, and that's how it made it onto our list of could we do this? Devo, Freedom of Choice.
Yeah.
Oh man, that album is so awesome. And
you probably don't own that album, but you could go back and listen to it.
Exactly. I don't own it, and the only song that I really remember was "Whip It," and that was just because "Whip It" was so huge.
Right. Yeah.
But there's so many really cool songs on that album. It's kind of a, Dave mentioned it's new wavy, but there's also guitars, and it's not all, they're almost like the Cars in a way to me, but not quite as rocky.
Right.
Rocky.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got really excited listening to that album the other day.
It's fun. I get on kicks with bands. It's like you hear this band and it's like, wow, they got 10 albums. I'm going to go listen to all 10 of them.
Yeah. The Devo just reminded me too, we were setting up for an event nearby, and my daughter was helping us, and I had a Bose speaker playing music, and I think we had talked about this maybe at some other point in an episode, recorded like mixtapes and things like that and gave them to our kids. Well, Devo's greatest hits was like a lot of their childhood. They had dance numbers to certain songs. My two daughters.
Wow.
And one of my daughters goes, hey, can you put on some Devo?
Ooh, nice.
And I'm like, you betcha.
Well done, Dave.
Hey.
Well done.
Dave and I did a lip sync to Devo's Peekaboo in college.
Yep.
What album was that on?
It's the
greatest hits.
And like it was it came out in '82. I can't remember what.
It was after Freedom of Choice.
It was after Freedom of Choice. Yeah.
And their first was "Are We Not Men?" Right?
We are Devo.
Yeah. Awesome. Totally awesome.
I think in the 90s I got into greatest hits because you started buying CDs. It's like, well, I already have these albums, or I had these albums. I have to buy the CD again. I'm probably going to buy greatest hits.
Yeah.
And so I started buying a lot of greatest hits because I already had the other stuff, but now I have it on CD. And I remember buying a Kool and the Gang greatest hits in the 90s, and it was like, man, that was just a total flashback to my childhood. All those songs in the early 80s.
I'm trying to remember a Kool and the Gang song beyond Cherish.
Yeah.
That song, for whatever reason, is
get your back up off the wall. Dance.
Yeah,
come on.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's early funk.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Jungle Boogie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ladies Night.
Yeah.
Feeling's right.
The feeling is right.
Oh, what a night.
Oh, what a night.
Did you guys ever listen to Curtis Blow? He's like the first real rapper, and then Sugar Hill Gang came after him. And
yeah.
That's,
I'd have to hear a song.
Some of that early rap is really good.
Yeah. See, the rap thing I never got into.
I totally got into that.
I know you did.
Yeah.
I was like, nope, this is not rock or heavy metal.
And then DMC had metal though. I mean, they had really heavy guitars on their stuff.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Well, see, that's another kind of tangent too, though. Like the friends, I had friends in 13, 14, 15 who were listening to some of that and exposed me to that, and I was like, what is this? This is a whole nother genre I didn't even know that existed really. And they're like, oh, this is the bomb. And I had a friend who was like making like compilation mixtapes of different rap songs. They were like blending them together. And I was like, my mind was blown. Yeah. But all that stuff, I started getting into rap and watching all the breaking movies. And all
we used to go, like I said, into Berkeley to all these used record stores. And a friend of mine was visiting from out of town. And this is probably in 85, 86. And he was a big Van Halen fan, and I was, and we're looking for whatever we can find. And all of a sudden he's like, Beastie Boys. Have you listened to the Beastie Boys?
Heck yeah.
I'm like, heck no. I was like, that stuff's awful. And he was like way into it. So he's buying all these, because this was early, and I don't know when they started, probably around 85 or 86. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember when the first album came out.
But
Right
he was buying all these kind of maxi singles and kind of these import singles from the Beastie Boys. It was all this other stuff that wasn't, licensed to ill stuff. It was like prior to that. And he was just sucking that stuff up like crazy. And I'm like, what are you doing?
this
you
is
just
not
please
rock.
me.
Yeah. I can't believe you're listening to Prince.
That was
I
was doing the same thing to him. I can't believe you're listening to the Beastie Boys.
All right, guys, that'll do it for today. In our next episode, we're taking a trip back to 1982 and talking about the Scorpions album, Blackout. It's going to be a good one. If you missed our previous episode, we talked about the self-titled debut album by The Cars. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, go back and check it out.
And if you enjoyed this episode today with us just reminiscing, I hope you get a chance to reminisce as well about your favorite music. Would you please do us a favor and share the episode link with a friend and help spread the word about When Records Ruled? Also, let us know what album or topic you'd like to hear us talk about in a future episode.
And when you get a chance, like right now would be great, leave us a 5-star review or a 4.5 of the show.
Always 5.
Or any other shows that you've listened to of your favorite podcast listening app. It would be very rock and roll of you to do so.
Rock and roll!
Or country western of you to do so.
Country and western of you.
Country and western.
All right.
Yes.
You can also follow us and leave comments on Instagram and Facebook at When Records Rule, where you can see pictures of us and the things that we're talking about and bands we're reviewing and remember when segments, all that good stuff. Check out our Spotify playlists where you can find all the albums we've reviewed and discussed on our podcast. And remember, we are not professional music critics.
No.
I repeat,
No.
we are not professional music critics. We're just 3 guys who like talking music.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see ya.
Good night.
See you later.